G'day legends! Today we are going to be going through what I think is one of the most unique and fascinating aspects of our sport. Like the whole sport of MMA, it's built around a contender rising up through the ranks to challenge the guy who's been defending his belt, and the bloke defending his belt building up his legacy over a sustained period of time to answer the question, who is the best fighter? And with that becomes this sort of game where we like to rummage through the deck of cards of every other fighter out there to see which next hopeful prospect is going to be the one to dethrone a champion. And every now and then, one of those prospects doesn't quite live up to the hype, does he? And he gets smacked with the label of fraud checked. It's such a unique aspect of our sport, man. It really is. So I figured today we could be doing yet another tier list, a fun list that we will pick up a bit later, because I'm not going to be able to get every single fraud check. I nearly said fraud sex right there. I'm not going to be able to get every single fraud check in MMA history, but I think I've come up with a pretty decent list here to get us started. And I know there's going to be some old heads out there that are going to be raging at this list as well, but I think I've come up with a fairly decent list. So I'm going to give you my biggest fraud checks that I could think of tier list, and then we'll pick this up on a live stream and you guys can add to it as well. Here we go. The ultimate fraud checks tier list presented by me, Dougie. Let's get into it. All right, look, a nice easy one that we're all going to be able to remember. I'm not going to reach too far deep into history for the first one. We're all going to be able to remember this one. Is old Shara Magomedov. Shara Magomedov? Yeah, Shara Magomedov versus MVP, Michael Venom Page. This one, right, did not shock me that much because I always sort of suspected that Shara was a bit of a fraud check train waiting to happen. After his very first fight, I was like, I don't think this guy is ever going to be that good. But people forget, man, this was a 50-50 fight. People went into this fight split dead center down the middle. Is a well-rounded karate-style martial artist like MVP going to be able to put it on this monster from the East? This Taekwondo sort of a nightmare. And yeah, MVP had a fairly decent career outside of the UFC, but as other fraud checks that are going to appear on this list have shown us, just because you've been outside of the UFC and had success doesn't mean you're going to do that well inside of the UFC. But it wasn't like Shara Magomedov had accumulated this huge legacy inside of the UFC. This wasn't, this wasn't like a Justin Gaethje going in there against an Eddie Alvarez, someone that had really established themselves. I mean, MVP was in his second, third fight in the UFC. Shara was on his third fight in the UFC. I think Shara was just well overhyped going into this one, and MVP being this older guy that the modern audience, the UFC audience hadn't really seen. It was making it a very 50-50 fight. But MVP ended up absolutely putting it on Shara Magomedov, and Shara was fraud checked. And now it's pretty well known out there in the MMA community that Shara is he's a bit of a circus show that we put out there, for the audience in Saudi Arabia to enjoy. He's never going to be a top 10, top 7 athlete. It just is what he can absolutely put on fun fights, and he's absolutely got a dog in him. He will scrap. It's going to be great fun fights, but he is never going to be future champion, future contender sort of material. And because of that, because Shara Magomedov was never overhyped to be a champion, and because he wasn't really that, he didn't come in that overhyped. And because he didn't come in that overhyped, his fraud checking wasn't that massive. So I'm going to put Shara Magomedov being fraud checked by MVP down here in the C tier. Right, next one up. Let's go back in time a little bit. Early bloody days, mate. Who remembers this one? Cowboy Hernandez versus Donald Cowboy Cerrone. One of my favorite fighters of all time. Cowboy, not Hernandez, that is. Cowboy's one of my favorite fighters of all time. Sucks that he never got into Valhalla. Cowboy turned into a little bit of a quitter. Couldn't step on top on big occasions. But that's neither here nor there, right? Alex Hernandez, in the press conference, this is what made this one so glorious. With Shara, it was a lot of the community hyping Shara up. But with this one, Hernandez was absolutely giving it to Cowboy in the pre-fight press conference, calling Cowboy a geriatric, saying that Cowboy's got no idea what he's doing. He's just a dude with a plastic pop gun riding around on a toy horse, on a toy horse. He's got little feathers in his cap. He's going to send old retired Cowboy back to the stables. The shit talking was insane, man. Even during the press conference, Cowboy was like, listen, dude, we're going to find out Saturday night. Why was Cowboy sounding like Max Holloway? I don't know, but he was. He was sounding like Max Holloway. It's like, we don't need to talk about it, brother. We'll find out Saturday night. And Hernandez just kept yapping at him like a little fucking chihuahua, mate. Just kept going at him until Cowboy Donald Cerrone, on that very Saturday night that we were talking about, landed that perfect Donald Cerrone jab head kick that Leon Edwards stole off Cowboy, and then proceeded to fucking ground and pound the living shit out of Hernandez. And it was absolutely wonderful to see. Wonderful to see. This one, I'm going to put this with B tier sort of a fraud checking. Yeah, we'll do a B tier sort of a fraud checking for this one. Next one up is, of course, how can you make a fraud checking video without talking about this one? Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint Denis. Oh my God, did Lucas Tracy do his job on this one, convincing all of you that BSD was going to be a close fight for Benoit Saint Denis. Don't pretend he didn't convince you, MMA community.
It's time that we have a moment of silence for Dustin Poirier and his career. Because I believe Benoit Saint Denis, who we just signed to fight, God bless Dustin Poirier for signing to fight Benoit Saint Denis.
This was another one that was split straight down the center. And the question was, is Dustin Poirier cooked? Is he too old? He's never going to be able to claw his way back to a title shot. Right? People forget, man, this was before he got the shot with Islam Makhachev, yeah? And then there was old Benoit Saint Denis, who, if you really looked at it, got absolutely steamrolled in his first fight in the UFC. Yeah, that fight absolutely should have been stopped. And yes, he got a win over Ishmael Bonfim, which is, not a horrible win at all. And got a win over Matt Favola, which is not a horrible win at all. And this was sort of the era of, is Gaethje and is Poirier and are Chandler, are the unks of lightweight going to be able to keep holding it down? And Oliveira as well, against Sarukian. Like, this was that era. Are the unks going to be able to keep holding it down? And it turned out they were, mate. And this was 50-50 split down the middle. And since Dustin Poirier took the soul of the Frenchman, Benoit Saint Denis hasn't looked the same. He hasn't looked the same. I'm very excited to see how he's going to go against Ruffy and see how well his rebuild phase goes. Yes, he won in Canada, but he should have won in Canada. He should have. Yeah, Canada, like the bloke that he fought in Canada was just the local guy from the gym nearby that happened to have a license to fight. Seriously, he was in the UFC years and years ago. Was already under contract, not using his contract. They just found some janitor at the local gym for BSD to beat up. He should have passed that. And quite frankly, BSD should have passed that test a lot easier than he did. Just saying. This was a fraud checking. I want to put it in 80, but I've got some real high-level fraud checks coming up for you boys. Don't worry about that. Man, have I got some fraud checks coming up for you boys. In fact, let's get into one of my biggest fraud checks as well. Mirko Cro Cop. That's right. I know. I can hear the screaming now. I can hear this. I can hear all the old unks going, what do you mean fucking Cro Cop? Oh, this is disgusting. That's crazy. How can you say Cro Cop got fraud checked? Bro, listen. Pride was a circus show, man. Pride was a circus show, and we know that some fights in Pride were set up. We don't know how many fights. I've not seen every single Pride fight. I've seen some Pride fights. I'm just saying, by the time that Cro Cop came to the UFC, he was meant to be a champion. And he lost 2 on the trot. He came to the UFC, won his first one, and then against Gabriel Gonzalez and Czech Congo of all bloody people, Cro Cop got Cro Copped. He got Cro Copped. He got head kicked, flatline dead. And then was sort of check his record. He's sort of 50-50 in the UFC. Cro Cop came into the UFC with all the hype. This might have been the first fraud checking the UFC's ever seen. Came into the UFC with all the hype in the world. won a fight, and then got head kicked. Cro Cop got Cro Copped. And because of the legacy and the rage that I can feel bubbling down there in the comments section, particularly from Super Shotgun, I'm putting Cro Cop as an A-tier fraud. Checking. Yes, indeed I am. Next one up. The Riddler, the Fiddler versus Bo bloody Nickal, mate. The Riddler, the Fiddler versus Bo Nickal. What a wonderful and fun fraud checking this was. Not so much in the... You know what? Straight away, I'm just going to be able to put this all the way down in D tier. Because it was a fraud checking, and the Riddler is a fraud. But not so much on, like, the MMA fans sort of perspective. You know, this was a real... My God, the fans expected something glorious to happen here with Cro Cop, and it never did. Whereas, it was the UFC that were really pushing Bo Nickal. And it turns out Bo Nickal is just a wrestling kid. And MMA is a sport of true chads that need to be able to take hits to their body. And much like how Brock Lesnar was scared of getting hit, and DC wanted to eye poke people so he didn't get hit by Stipe, Bo Nickal, the wrestler, does not enjoy getting hit to the body. Or anywhere to the face, much like Colby Covington in 2024 against Leon Edwards. Doesn't like getting hit. Wrestlers, mate, they don't love getting hit in the face. It's just a fact. And the Riddler absolutely fiddled his guts up. Not the way that he did with Robert Whittaker. With Robert Whittaker as a real chatting. Robert could have won that fight. Yeah, that fight was very close to a robbery. Doesn't matter. This video isn't about Robert Whittaker. He'll be back. But Robert Whittaker was able to take hundreds of knees to the body and return them one for one. But Bo Nickal, he literally took one shot to the body and just curled over. And the last we heard of Bo Nickal is that he's returning to the wrestling mats. The Riddler literally scared him out of the sport. He was a massive letdown for the UFC. He was fraud checked, not so much in the eyes of the fans, but like I said, in the eyes of the UFC, he has been horribly, horribly fraud checked. Who else have we got? We've got all of Indian MMA. 20% of the world's population yet to win a single fight in MMA. All of men's Indian MMA. Considering how much these people rage out on the internet about seeing boobs and vagin, sir, and not redeeming codes, and how can she slap? Considering the amount of anger within the Indian population, the fact that not one of the near billion people, quite a few people, don't bother Googling it. It comes out to about 18% of the entire global population. Considering that not 1% of not one of those men can get a win in the UFC, absolutely fraud checked. All raging on the internet, no ability to be able to back it up. Indian MMA. There you go. The whole of Indian MMA. Next one up. Oh man, this one's gonna be good. Batista versus Patchy Mix. Patchy Mix was fraud checked. Horribly, horribly fraud checked. Absolutely fraud checked. There were 83% of people. 83% of people were picking Patchy Mix to win. And it was the MMA community, and it was the hardcore MMA community. The hipster MMA community is what it was. Just because MMA Guru put out a hit on Batista, everyone hated Batista because of what he did against Aldo, which is fair enough. But they completely forgot about the Batista-Cameron Simon fights. They completely forgot about Batista's entire career. Batista's actually quite good. Yeah, and exciting. Can be. And the other hipster MMA fans, this was the hipster pick. I watch other regional mate, you don't know, dude. Dude, you don't know MMA if you don't watch Bellator prelims, dude. What do you mean you don't watch every single Ryzen fight, dude? What do you mean you don't watch Indian boxing? Bruh, do you even like MMA? Bruh, Patchy Mix is gonna run circles. Listen. The best Bellator fighters ever are barely, the very top of Bellator scratches the bottom of 10 to 5 in the UFC. Always has, always will. It's what it's going to be. I'd add Aaron Pico to the list right now. I would. He's going to lose. He's not going to be, he's going to Michael Chandler. They all do. They just all do. This was a fraud checking of fraud checking, and a big one for the fans. He came in with more hype. he did come in with more hype than Benoit Saint Denis. Yeah, that's about right. Next one up. Who have we got next? This will be shocking to some people, but I think it's fair. Ronda Rousey. And I picked I picked this image of Ronda Rousey shadow boxing like an absolute potato with her eyes crossed. She looks like Nate the Train shadow boxing right now. Honestly, I've seen Trevor Peek throw better combinations than this, but this was the era of Ronda Rousey where she had just torn through level 1 of MMA just using judo, and we hadn't really started mixing the martial arts that well in the UFC, and she went in there against a kickboxer, Holly Holm, and she was on late night television. Joe Rogan was going around. There was a legitimate conversation going around about this person being able to outbox Floyd Mayweather. That was a real conversation that was happening. Yeah, about all the men that she could destroy in boxing. I don't know why. She was a superhero. Crazy. And she went and fought Holly Holm, a kickboxer, and got absolutely destroyed. And then destroyed again by Amanda Nunes. How can you say one of the GOATs of our sport was absolutely fraud checked? I don't know, but you can, and it just straight up did happen. Oh, is it F tier because she was a champion and she was in a stylistical period of time where there weren't that many styles for her? Or is it S tier because of the amount of fan support that she was getting? Listen, for where she was in her career, it was an understandable turning of events. For where the fans had her, for where the UFC and the MMA community had her as being able to outbox Floyd Mayweather, she is simultaneously an S and F tier at the same time. Ronda Rousey is a truly special fraud-checking candidate. Next one up on the list, Vitor Petrino. Vitor bloody Petrino. He went in against Anthony Smith with so much hype. So much hype, man. Where was he at? 91% of people were picking Vitor Petrino to beat Anthony Smith. And you know what? So was I. I mean, I was right about Shara Bullet and I was right about Batista, but I was 100% on the Vitor Petrino train, man. But then when you look at it, like, again, the bottom of the rankings are barely a step above regional MMA, and then the top of the rankings are, well, they're where the UFC sort of start. You know, everything outside of the rankings is like Apex. It's a step above Cage Warriors. The rankings is where the UFC actually begin. Like, he went through a whole bunch of blobs, man. Tyson Pedro, you know, blob. Yeah, I mean, obviously he was going to get through that. Modestus Bukauskas, yet another blob. But then when the fight came with Anthony Smith, Tyson Pedro just shoved his head into Anthony Smith's standing guillotine. Like, I was about to say like someone completely untrained, but I don't know, even a human being with basic survival instincts knows not to shove their head into a trained martial artist's frame. They're going to rip it off. Nothing to be said here except a complete breakdown of all psychological abilities to think. He went full retard, and we all fell for the Tyson Pedro hype train. Again, but he wasn't exactly like Ronda Rousey. It's not like he built up a huge amount of legacy. He just sort of blobbed his way through light heavyweight and then fell apart completely. And finally, lastly on my list, I believe, yes, the last one, all of PFL. Literally all of the PFL. The PFL absolutely fraud checked. The PFL graduated into a proper fighting organization after being formerly known as the International Fighters League or the International World of Fighting. Doesn't matter. And they had gone on a $500 million recruitment drive sponsored by the Saudi Arabians to make themselves the second best co-leader in combat sports. All while this was happening, from 2017, it was the International League of Fighting, all up to 2021 when it became the PFL, and then they fought Bellator. The PFL fought Bellator at the end of 2024. At this point, Bellator was pretty much known to be dead in the water by 2024. For the last 2 years, it was pretty much, everyone knew that Bellator was done. And Bellator was made up of absolute unks and rejects from the UFC. Yeah? Like, again, Bader, Musashi, Yoel Romero. Old men that the UFC did not want, that could not be successful in the UFC. This was the moment for the PFL to rise up and prove that it was the co-leader. Look, the gold flag, the new gold flag, and the tattered old black flag with all the unks on Bellator. And Bellator went 5 wins over 1 win against the PFL. Like, it shouldn't have happened. The Bellator, literally after this, went on to simply no longer exist anymore. And the PFL didn't even bother fighting all the champions that they had at Bellator. They just let them go. Like, Bellator was so done. So done. And PFL lost 5-1. On their own, Ronda's getting knocked down one because this fraud checking. Bellator managed to fraud check an entire company essentially at its own funeral. There needs to be a documentary made about that. Really, Bellator. Unbelievable work from Bellator. There we go. This is my fraud check tier list. I reckon this is a pretty good one. Yeah, Cro Cop's going to really annoy people. But it's true. It's just true. It is what it is. Anyway, boys, that's that. If this is your first time here, welcome. My name's Dougie. I make an MMA video every single day of the week, and I try and go live as often as I can, which pretty much turns out to be every single day of the week. You want to know when I go live? You want to know when a new video drops? Subscription button, notification bell. That's how you figure all that out. Let me know down in the comments which one annoyed you the most. I'm sure you will. And why Robert Whittaker doesn't deserve to be on this list. If you can't be bothered commenting, leave a like. And if you're one of the paying members of the channel, or you donate, you gift, you support the channel, you're one of the bloody legends. Your names are up on the next slide to say thank you for always supporting the channel. I really appreciate you guys. Until then, I'll see you all in the next video. Have yourselves a good one. Goodbye.